So, Jack, you have built this amazing community, and from what I've watched from afar with the visualized value is that you're willing to try things with your community, and then when it doesn't work, you pull it back. What have you learned over time about building a lasting community?
So, I think there's a couple things that strike me about. Like there's a lot of debate around building an audience, building a community, build a personal brand, all of those, all it's cliches at this point. And one of my friends, Sam Parr, he runs a newsletter called The Hustle. Might have heard of it, but he had this great line where he said, if you leave your business for 2 weeks and nothing happens, you have an audience. If you leave your business for 2 weeks and it keeps running, you have a community. So essentially the idea of you play a role, but almost like an architectural role rather than a performative role where you show up every day and X, Y, and Z happens. So I think where you actually get longevity and like a massive amount of value generated is trying to like increase the connections within the network. So I think that's how a community grows. And the thing that I've learned over time is visualized value. I think, and again, this is just realized in retrospect, not a lot of this was strategic to begin with, but your ability to like consistently publish along a theme or to just be, actually, that's not accurate. I think I'm putting the ideas out into the world that I resonate with. So I'm like curating a worldview almost by here's like 500 things that I believe to be true. And over time, I think the fidelity of that worldview just like attracts people with similar beliefs and desires. And there's a lot of mimetic theory going on there as well. And that ability to have an asset, I think that represents that, brings the right type of people into your community. And then like 1 + 1 = 3 in a lot of those scenarios. So like two people that never would have been connected before, both value, let's say 60% of the things that Visualize Value puts out, you put them together, and then that connection like increases the value of the network. So a lot of the stuff that we've been trying recently is, less of a broadcast thing and more of a how do you facilitate interaction among people? Because, there's the stuff that goes out on the front end is, it doesn't differ massively from what exists behind the doors, right? It's more of an environment that contains people that think like you do or are gonna, want to think like you do and challenge the way you think to get there. So I think over time I've just realized more and more that connecting people within the community is just a massively valuable thing. And it's way more relational than transactional, and that's where I think that's how a community becomes valuable. It's like what the quality of the relationships within the community, not the relationship with an individual member to whoever is running the thing. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you're describing like truly graph theory, where you're saying, look, every time you add a new node in here, if you can make sure that node is connected to every other node, then you actually have exponential growth of the strength of the network, meaning that for every new person that comes in, that person gets every single connection that was already there, plus they then can build into them. And you see that once you start doing that, it's like the density gets heavier, and so your gravity well grows because it actually pulls down into that kind of space, and then more people can come into it. There's more things get built out of it, so then people can catch. As they're flying by, they may catch somebody on the outside and then say, oh, the deeper I go, the more connections, the more interesting things I see. I 100% understand what you're saying.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's easy to gloss over that in the beginning because it just feels, especially when it's smaller, but like bringing things in that make that happen has been super powerful. Like one of the very tactical or tangible things that there's one member in the community that facilitates meetups between people. So they will reach out to people, be like, oh, you should meet this person, or, you know, there's a gap in your experience that this person has, or you're interested in going into this world, you should talk to this person. And it seems like a small thing, but I think the compounding nature of, I think graph theory is, I'm going to have to do a little bit more reading on that, but the density and the quality of the connections in the network, it really does compound quickly once you have a behavior like that in place. And I think relationships are really that's how you build an advantage in any area, right? It's like who you're connected to.
So I run a network called the Articulate Ventures Network, and this is for people that are like, I have ideas that are kind of up the graph. They're thought of by a few people, but not everybody agrees with them. But I want a place where I can articulate them, and not that people will agree with me. Like, this is an environment where people are saying, I will disagree with you, but respectfully, which I think in a lot of ways people don't have this.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we started doing was what we called amateur hour. Like, so what is a thing that you learned, not because it's your profession, but because you loved it? So we had a guy come on that did ham radio. We had the Ring brothers, who I know at least one of them's in your network, did a whole thing on how do you actually butcher a cow. So they're taking photographs of skinning it, and we're doing one on epistemology. And what I didn't expect to come out of this is then you give each new person in the network a chance to be like, hey, this is what I know about, this is what I like. And the number of people that then can come up and talk with them fluently about a thing that they know more deeply, it just, you watch how this single thing probably created more interconnections in the network than any other thing that we had done. And it was just saying like, hey, it's your turn. You take the marker and start showing what's going on here.
Yeah. Totally agree.
And I find that that's what goes on in your network, because people in your Slack channel, like, share things, right? They're like, hey, this is what I was working on, give me feedback. And I think that was one of the things that made people find value in knowing each other as opposed to just knowing Jack.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think there's only so much one person can, well, if your primary function is to make the network valuable, identifying the thing that you do that does that best, I think it's almost a recruiting, my role is a recruiting role. So how do you go out and make things that speak to the types of people that are going to make the network more valuable? So you can almost divorce those things into two camps. Like, this is like material to produce connections to people to bring them in, and then like engineering activities and things that are going to connect people internally is kind of the secondary piece of that. And people in the community learn to kind of do that by themselves. Like, we had a baby 6 weeks ago. We were almost off the face of the earth, honestly, for a month at least. And there's a bunch of activity, people taking on responsibilities and putting on meetups and just staying in touch. So it's kind of an unstoppable thing if you can get that, if you can get that critical mass of connection between members.
So talk about times when you figured out things you thought the network was going to go do well, and then it was like, that didn't work.
Yeah, what have we got there? I think honestly, the scheduled stuff is difficult to maintain momentum on. So you come out of the gate. We did office hours every week since we began. First one, huge amount of attendance. Second one, a little bit less attendance. Third one, a little bit less attendance. So there's like this, I think, trying to like fight against the like internet entropy almost, is like the scheduled nature of the community has gotten less and less utilized, I guess. I think like as a like product builder, you want to make sure people feel as though the value is consistent, right? If you're paying a subscription for something, I want new content. I want new stuff. I want to, make sure that what I'm paying for is funding some like optionality for me in the future. But what I've noticed is like people buy that, but what they really get, the value is kind of indescribable, or it's very difficult to quantify the things that really people really get value from, which is a relationship or one conversation or one introduction, which far outweighs the 100 pieces of content that exist in the archive there and can take your life in a totally different direction. Both are valuable, I think, but it's hard to pull out of that too once you've promised it. So it's like, oh, we're going to do these weekly things, but hey, if 20 people show up, it's better that we put our energy elsewhere. We're better off like going out and doing this publicly and getting more people into the community so you can build relationships with those people. And that was kind of a hard band-aid to rip off, but starting to realize that just access to a community of people is the value, as opposed to continually pushing content into that network, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, like, in effect, like when people first find you, they get that that kind of experience of euphoria, like, oh my gosh, look at all these things I'm learning, look at all this stuff. But once they learn the general idea, they can still extract value out of each independent thing that you put in. But the big exhilaration from I'm now discovering a new way to look at it. It's very few books that you want to read 10 times.
Yes.
But it's not that you want to throw it out. Like, you want it to be good. But if that book then connects you with a bunch of people that are like, I also really liked this book and found value out of it. But it's nearly impossible to sell people on the nebulous, nameless culture of a community. They have to have some other reason that they come in, and their expectations be so thoroughly beat by this other thing that they're okay that they're not getting that exhilaration feeling anymore.
Yeah, agreed. It's also this phenomenon of like enough, if you listen to enough advice, it all cancels out to zero at a certain point. So you just choose a set of principles and let that guide everything. And at a certain point, your addition is dilution. And it's like learning where that line is it's a process to learn.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.